Hello and welcome to The Top Story, the podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, the French government has collapsed after Prime Minister Michel Barnier was ousted in a no-confidence vote. South Korea's national police agency is investigating President Yoon Suk-yeol over the possible crime of internal insurrection as Parliament prepares to vote on his impeachment following his failed attempt to declare martial law. And a manhunt is underway after a shooter killed the chief executive of one of the largest insurers in the United States. We begin in Europe. The French government has collapsed after lawmakers from the National Assembly ousted Prime Minister Michel Barnier in a no-confidence vote. Over 330 deputies from parties on the left and the right voted in favour, forcing Barnier to resign. It is the first time in over 50 years that a no-confidence vote has removed a French government. The left-wing France Unbowed Party called for President Emmanuel Macron's resignation minutes after the government fell. Ross Cullen has more from Paris.
Well, it was a dramatic session at the National Assembly. After days of debate and constitutional uncertainty, France's government has been toppled by the opposition. It was the first time this has happened since 1962. 331 lawmakers out of 577 voted in favour of the no-confidence motion in a stinging defeat for the government and a public rebuke of the Prime Minister. Michel Barnier becomes the shortest-serving Prime Minister in modern French history. One leading member of his party said it was a sad day for France.
I was and am proud to build rather than to destroy, and to have listened during this time to those who have told me this, in good faith for the good of the country. Dear lawmakers, I cannot accept that institutional destabilisation could be the goal that would unite a majority of members of Parliament here, at a moment when our country is going through a deep moral, economic, financial and civic crisis.
But for the opposition, they have succeeded in bringing down the government, but only after rival parties from across the political spectrum came together. Marine Le Pen, the parliamentary leader of the far-right National Rally, the biggest single party in the National Assembly, was criticised by ministers for allying herself to the far-left's motion, but she defended her decision during the debates that preceded the vote.
Today, the no-confidence motion appears for us to be a necessity to put an end to the chaos, to protect the French people from a dangerous, unfair and punitive budget, which, moreover, worsens the deficit. Institutional realities force us to join our voices with those of the extreme left. It is not with joy in our heart that we do this, as the ideas of the extreme left and the left dragged to the extreme are so devastating for the unity, security and prosperity of the country.
The move by parliamentarians plunges France into further uncertainty. The budget for 2025 has still not been formally passed into law, although the constitution allows special measures that would avert a US-style government shutdown. And now that the administration has been toppled, the European Union's second biggest economy is in territory it has not had to navigate for more than 60 years. All eyes will now be on Emmanuel Macron. The French president appoints the Prime Minister, and the French leader is due to address the public in a prime-time address on Thursday. Barnier is likely to remain in a caretaker capacity until Macron names a new Prime Minister.
That was Ross Cullen in Paris. Then in Asia, South Korea's National Assembly is preparing to vote on an impeachment against President Yoon Suk-yeol over his failed attempt to declare an emergency martial law. The opposition Democratic Party and 5 other minor parties plan to put the motion up for a vote as early as Friday. By law, the National Assembly is required to cast a secret vote on the impeachment motion within 72 hours after it is proposed. Yoon declared martial law Tuesday night before repealing it early Wednesday after lawmakers voted against it. The Korean National Police Agency has initiated an investigation into President Yoon over the possible crime of internal insurrection. Jack Barton has more from Seoul.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has accepted the resignation of his defense chief, Kim Yong-hyun, who is said to be the figure that guided President Yoon on this idea of imposing martial law. Now, we don't know if that's true or he's just being scapegoated for this, but he was in charge of the military forces who seized the National Assembly the other night, so he certainly played a significant role in it. And there had already been calls not just from the opposition, but also within the ruling People Power Party, of which President Yoon belongs, for him to be sacked or to step down. In the end, he volunteered his resignation, and he will now be replaced by a retired four-star general, Choi Byung-hyuk, who is the acting ambassador to Saudi Arabia, but also was the second in command of the joint forces, South Korea and the US, from 29 to 20, back under the previous administration, which was the Democrat Party. So it should be a fairly smooth passage through the National Assembly for his appointment. But a big change. But also, yes, the impeachment proceedings. We seem to have a revolt within the ruling party. Many other things in motion at the moment. They will. The leader of the opposition party wants to impeach President Yoon, but they're going to need some votes from the People Power Party. The opposition Democrat Party has around 100, well, actually they have some 5 minor parties in there. Altogether, they can expect around about 192 votes that will definitely vote to impeach President Yoon, but they need 200, so they need a 2/3 of the 300-strong National Assembly. Han Dong-hoon is the leader of the party, and he is calling on members not to vote, even though he's saying the martial law was unconstitutional, and even though he has called on President Yoon to leave the party. So he's saying for Yoon to step down as president would create chaos. They're going to try and block the impeachment. But nonetheless, you know, he's saying the party was blindsided. Their view is very unfavorable of what has happened. So it remains to be seen. Will some of President Yoon's own party members revolt?
That was Jack Barton on the latest of South Korea's political turmoil. South Korean markets are stabilizing following the brief emergency martial law imposed by President Yoon, which triggered political turmoil. However, experts warn that the economic fallout could linger, potentially affecting investor confidence and disrupting trade relations. Shane Han has more.
South Korean rule under martial law may have been short-lived, but the economic and financial ripples are still being felt. Much like the rest of the country, investors were caught off guard by President Yoon Suk-yeol's declaration earlier this week.
It's ended up being more of a surprise than with any kind of a large effect on the real economy. So on the production side, we shouldn't see that many problems. But for anything that deals with political uncertainty, the problem will probably persist for a long time.
Financial authorities have been left scrambling to stabilize a market during a time of political instability. The government says it will provide ample liquidity to equity and foreign exchange markets. The central bank says it's ready to mobilize a $7 billion stock market stabilization fund while loosening collateral rules to prevent a credit crunch. An immediate crisis may have been averted, but the long-term effects on South Korea's economy and global standing remain uncertain. Investors and trade partners may be more cautious, and businesses may call for stronger safeguards against political disruptions. Local small businesses already struggling with inflation and global economic challenges are bracing for potential knock-on effects. The nation's largest labor union, with roughly 1 million members, are on indefinite strike, calling on President Yoon to step down from office.
It is now time to rally nationwide, both inside and outside the National Assembly, to demand the resignation of Yoon Suk-yeol administration without wasting a single moment. Furthermore, it is time to gather collective national will to hold accountable and punish all forces that supported martial law and plotted insurrection.
South Korea's economy has weathered political storms in the past, including a presidential impeachment in 2017.
We had the occasions where presidents had this type of problems before, most notably with the Park Geun-hye problem. So while we will have some negative impact from the martial law, it'll be on the areas that we more or less know about. To take a cliche, it'll be a known risk rather than an unknown risk.
With martial law now lifted, South Korea's policymakers face an uphill battle to provide reassurance and prevent long-term damage to the economy. It's a critical test for a country hoping to prove its economic resilience and stability to the world.
That was Shane Ham reporting. Turning to the Middle East, the Syrian army is engaged in fierce fighting against rebel factions in Hama, saying it has killed at least 300 militants. The Syrian military also says reinforcements have arrived to bolster the front lines. Opposition forces have intensified assaults to capture its former stronghold. Haider Kazwini has more from Hama.
The opposition forces are now at Hama's northern outskirts, having captured 11 surrounding villages, which puts them 6 kilometers far from this point. The Battle of Hama carries huge stakes if the Syrian government loses control over it, as the city is considered the gate of northern Syria. It's also a station for troops mobilizing and supply routes for Aleppo-vowed counteroffensive. In case this city is taken by the opposition, then the priority of the Syrian military will be shifted from launching a counter-offensive to regain Aleppo to launching an operation to secure a supply route to Aleppo from Hama. The likely fall of the city will be seen as a second heavy blow to the Syrian military. The opposition forces have been trying to invade the city from 3 directions, but the Syrian military managed to absorb the attacks and stop them at the northern outskirts of the city. The battle here is described as attack and retreat one. The Syrian Russian Air Force has been working overtime, decreasing the pace of the opposition forces' advance, while more reinforcements from the Syrian military elite units are reaching. The attacks on the outskirts of Hama sparked a large wave of displacement from surrounding villages to the safer places, as swarms of drones and indiscriminate shelling have been used as a tactic by the rebels in their assault. The light traffic jam and the people's limited activity signals a state of anxiety in the city, as status quo on the close front line is still unclear. Sounds of bombs and Air Force jets are alarming signs of possible return of a long war. HTS has launched a surprise attack that ended in full control over Aleppo, and they had a good momentum. But as time goes, the Syrian military and its allies will have enough time to settle the front and cut the route of supplies to the militants nearby. If the Syrian military holds in the city in the coming few days, then the momentum of the opposition attack will be lost, and that would generate a turning point of the offensive that has ended 4 years of relative calm across Syria.
That was Haider Kazwini on the conflict in Syria. Still in the Middle East, Israeli settlers have attacked 2 Palestinian towns in the West Bank after the police arrived in the area to dismantle an unauthorized farming outpost the settlers built. The attackers burned homes and clashed with troops. Israeli authorities have arrested 8 people for suspected property damage and assaulting security forces. Jonathan Regev has more from Tel Aviv.
It happened after army forces came in to dismantle an illegal outpost built by some faction of settlers in the West Bank. And in retaliation, those settlers clashed with soldiers and then entered into 2 villages in the West Bank, Hawara and Bet Furik, both just being a little bit to the south of the city of Nablus, and torching cars and torching some structures. Some of them were arrested. It's a very delicate balance there. The army, not only, of course, confronting Palestinians, but the army and police forces also forcing Israeli settlers. The vast majority of the settler community is not taking part in these activities, but there is a faction within the settler community known here as the Hilltop Youth, who are in various occasions have been involved in these kind of activities. That's quite a major headache for the Israeli security establishment.
That was Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Finally, in North America, a manhunt is underway for the suspect in the killing of the chief executive officer of one of the largest insurers in the U.S. United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson was shot and killed in Midtown Manhattan on Wednesday. Authorities say the shooting was a targeted attack. Karen Mitchell has more from New York.
Well, it's been an active scene throughout the day as this investigation is still ongoing. There are a lot of moving parts and new information that's been coming in. Here's what we know so far. We know that Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, a position he's held since April of 2021, was fatally gunned down as he was trying to enter the Hilton Hotel. Now, authorities say they believe that the incident was targeted and not a random act of violence.
It appears the suspect was lying in wait for several minutes. And as the victim was walking to the conference hotel, the suspect approached from behind and fired several rounds. striking the victim at least once in the back and at least once in the right calf. Many people passed the suspect, but he appeared to wait for his intended target.
The 50-year-old was shot just before 7 a.m. outside the Hilton Hotel. Now, it's a busy area and it's a popular tourist hotel and a popular venue for conferences. He was in the city for United Healthcare's 2024 Investor Conference. That event was to have started at 8 a.m. and was to be held to discuss the company's long-term strategic growth priorities. The event ended when organizers announced that there had been a shooting at the hotel. Multiple reports reveal he arrived at the venue early to prepare and suggest the mass shooter knew which door Thompson was going to enter into when he was shot several times before fleeing on a bicycle, as reported by authorities. Now, Thompson was transported to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced dead. Now, United Healthcare is the largest provider of Medicare Advantage plans in the U.S. and manages health insurance coverage for employers in state and Medicaid programs that are federally funded. Now, authorities do not have a motive for this shooting yet, but they are offering a reward. It's been increased to $10,000 for anyone with information into what possibly happened here. And they have released 2 images of the alleged assailant as he was fleeing from the scene. He was last seen entering Central Park. Now, I can't emphasize enough how congested this area is, what a busy time of year it is for both people at that time of the morning who would have been commuting to work and tourists getting a start on their day. It is a very busy tourist area with a lot of theaters, hotels, big department stores and shops around. And there would have been people in the area that were moving about their day. Now, I spoke to a couple of people, passersby here, who said they're incredibly rattled, but they are continuing about their day. We've seen people coming in and out of the hotel, so it's business as usual. But definitely there is some worry over people just making their way in and about town. Some of them I spoke to said they're relieved to learn that it's not a random gunman that is still on the loose and that authorities are looking for.
That was President Michel in New York. Now, recapping the headlines, the French government has collapsed after Prime Minister Michel Barnier was ousted in a no-confidence vote. South Korea's National Police Agency is investigating President Yoon Suk-yeol over the possible crime of internal insurrection as Parliament prepares to vote on his impeachment following his failed attempt to declare martial law. And a manhunt is underway after a shooter killed the chief executive of one of the largest insurers in the United States. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qizhi. Thank you for listening.